The next time I saw Chase Reed, it was at a little guest house in the Rockies. I'd just finished feeding my son breakfast and was wiping his mouth when Chase came out from the kitchen carrying a tray. Our eyes met. I saw his pupils dilate in shock. 3 years had passed. His skin was weathered and reddened from the sun, his face covered in stubble, with new lines etched around his eyes from the harsh elements. Then his gaze landed on my son. He froze mid-step, his eyes going wide with disbelief before flooding with joy. He hurried over, his eyes locked on my little boy. "Sweetheart, can you say daddy?" I lowered my head, turned sideways, and pulled my son protectively into my arms. 3 years ago, when I was 5 months pregnant, Chase had felt trapped. He decided to hit the road with his buddy, a female friend, and bike across the Rockies. He told me to cut off all contact and give him 3 years of freedom. From that day on, I cut everything about him out of my life, including our child. In my arms, my son blinked, puzzled. "Mommy, who's that man?" "Nobody. Don't listen to him. Let's go." I scooped him up and turned to leave. After Chase Reed left, I'd gotten rid of the baby I'd been carrying and married someone else. My husband and I were happy together, deeply in love. The son in my arms had nothing to do with Chase. "Ivy, are you still mad at me? How can you keep a son from knowing his own father?" Chase blocked my path, his face dark with anger. I met his eyes, calm and unshaken. "We've been apart for 3 years. What makes you think you're his father? He isn't your son." Chase let out a sigh. "You're still holding it against me that I left for so long. But freedom is in my nature. I was never going to give it up for a child. I needed time to be myself." I held my son tighter and shook my head. "Chase, I'm not holding anything against you. I love my husband. And you and I have nothing left between us. Move." Back when we'd agreed to spend the rest of our lives together, I'd let him skip registering our marriage, all in the name of his precious freedom. Then I got pregnant, and he was still off cycling with his buddy, every chance he got. Morning sickness, leg cramps, sleepless nights. I endured all of it alone. Even so, he complained behind my back to Monica Cole about how stressful my pregnancy was making his life. The two of them hit it off immediately and decided to spend 3 years cycling out to the Rockies. When it came to childbirth and raising a kid, Monica told him not to worry about it, that women just handled that instinctively. Chase believed her. By the time I was 5 months along, I could barely move without pain. I went to the hospital for treatment, and when I came back, they were gone. Not even a word goodbye. That was the moment I made my decision. Shaking, I turned around and walked straight back to the hospital, and had the pregnancy terminated that same day. I've thanked myself for that courage ever since. If I hadn't done it, I wouldn't have the life I have now. Sensing how cold I'd gone, Chase frowned. "There you go again, talking like you're still bitter. You must still care about me somewhere in there. Otherwise, why bring the kid to find me before the 3 years were even up?" I thought I'd made myself more than clear, but none of it seemed to reach him. I insisted he get out of my way. Finally, looking as though he were making some agonizing concession, he said, "Fine. For the kid's sake, if you fix that attitude of yours, I'll let you two tag along. But I don't have the energy to look after you both. Don't get in the way of my plans." I glanced over his temp job uniform. He was probably picking up odd jobs wherever the road took him. Following him would mean nothing but hardship. I wasn't going to waste any more time on him. I moved to walk around him with my son in my arms, but he threw out an arm and blocked me. His voice turned urgent. "Ivy, what are you doing? Whatever you say, I'm still his father." My son couldn't help lifting his head, glancing between the two of us, and asking with innocent confusion, "Mommy, why do I have 2 daddies?" Chase's expression froze. "2 daddies? What do you mean 2 daddies?" My son tightened his arms around my neck and explained earnestly, "I already have a daddy. That's who we came here to find." The blood drained from Chase's face. He stood frozen, pupils trembling, too stunned to speak. "You already have a daddy?" My son nodded firmly. Then, as if something had clicked, Chase spun back to me, his eyes full of accusation. "Is this how you've been raising him? Even the kid knows he came here to find me, and I'm standing right here, and you still won't let him call me dad." We had come to find the boy's father, but that didn't mean the father was Chase. Even when I was carrying Chase's child, I'd never seen him show this much concern. And now, standing in front of him was a son that belonged to another man. I had no idea where this obsession of his was coming from. I frowned and raised my voice. "Chase, listen carefully. I got married a long time ago. This isn't your son." Still playing tough. A flicker of anger crossed Chase's face. What could you possibly gain from keeping a boy from his own father? Just then, a voice I recognized cut in. "You're still picking fights with Chase, huh? 2 daddies. Don't go warping the poor kid's head." The tone was teasing, but mockery ran underneath it. I looked toward the doorway. Monica. She strolled over, laughing easily, and clapped Chase on the shoulder. "A weak woman like her can't raise a kid properly. Now that you're back, you can teach him right." Chase looked at my son and nodded. "That's right. I'll teach him the right values, and I'll take him out to chase freedom with me. Let him really experience nature. I nearly laughed out loud inside. They had no idea. My son had lived a life of comfort and the best education there was since the day he was born. He loved the cello, so my husband had commissioned him a custom handmade instrument and hired one of the most respected professors from the conservatory to teach him. Once he was a little older, we'd take him traveling around the world, cultivating his character through music, exploring every corner of the globe. My husband was nothing like Chase, who'd thrown everything away to go live like some drifter in the wild. Mommy, he's going to teach me? Does he even play cello? My son tugged at my sleeve, thoroughly confused. Chase's expression shifted, as if he'd just heard something outrageous. Cello? Performances too. His voice was thick with disbelief. Where would you even get the money for that? I looked him dead in the eye, the corner of my mouth curling. My husband happens to be very rich. Chase's lips moved a few times before any words came out, his expression a mess. You actually married someone else. He stared at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes. Don't fall for it, huh? Monica burst out laughing. She's just trying to get under your skin. She wants you to think she and the kid are doing just fine without you. At that, the tension in Chase's face eased. You can't joke about things like that anymore. I don't have time for these games with you. And don't think that just because I still care, you get to control me. I'm doing great on my own, and I don't need you managing my life. Same goes for the kid. Just let him play and be a kid, let him be free. I hadn't even gotten a word of protest out before my son poked me. Right, Mommy, when are we going out to play? We're running out of time. At the same moment, someone shouted Chase's name from the direction of the kitchen. Go play then, son. Do whatever you want. Freedom's what matters most. Chase tossed that out and hurried off toward the kitchen. Monica arched an eyebrow, the contempt in her eyes no longer hidden. Can't survive without a man around, can you? 3 months left on your 3 years, and you already can't hold out. I felt nothing at all. I've said it plenty of times already. Chase and I have nothing left between us. I have my own family. Tell him to have some self-respect. With that, I took my son and walked straight out of the dining area. Back in my room, Nathan Sterling called. His voice, warm and gentle, put me at ease almost instantly. How's the place treating you, honey? Anything you're not happy with? I'll have the manager fix it. I thought about the unpleasantness earlier, but didn't mention it. We'd be leaving tomorrow anyway, no point causing trouble for the manager over it. Everything's great. Rowan loves it here. We can't wait to see you. Nathan chuckled softly. Good. I'll be there to meet up with you too soon. Mwah. A kiss for my darling wife, and mwah, a kiss for our darling son. Whatever cloud had settled over me instantly cleared. After changing, I took my son out for the afternoon. We bought a small mountain of souvenirs, which the 2 guides I'd hired carried for us. By evening, when we got back to the guest house, Monica was sprawled in the courtyard. The second she spotted us, she curled her lip. Spending money like that. Chase's money's just that easy to burn through, huh? Chase was sweeping nearby. The moment he saw my son, he plastered on a smile and reached for him. I pulled my son behind me instantly, and the 2 guides dropped what they were carrying and stepped between us. Chase's hand froze midair. What's your problem? I'm his father, he snapped. Watching him act so righteous about it, I could only think how absurd it was. My position couldn't have been clearer. I had a family, and my son wasn't his. Yet he was still drowning in his own delusion. I challenged him. Fine. Then tell me his name. Chase choked. Pure panic flooded his eyes. Even the child I'd once carried for him, he'd never once thought to name. After a long silence, my son poked his head out and said in his bright, clear voice, I'm Rowan Sterling. I was born in the fall. Chase's eyes went wide, shock and confusion flashing across his face, his hands trembling. That timing, there's no way this kid was born in autumn. No way. Oh please. Monica sneered. Ivy, you're still trying to prove some big romantic thing between you and Chase, huh? You women really do overdo it. Rowan obviously commemorates the autumn we set off cycling. Chase seized on that like a lifeline and nodded hard at Monica. That's right. I said coldly. No need for that. My son was simply born in autumn. If some people can't take a hint, that's not my problem. Chase's eyes hardened. Ivy, you can't be so rude to Monica. Chase, the guest house manager came jogging over, his expression stern. I let you work here alone in exchange for housing 2 people. I've already been more than generous. You will not bother my guests. Get back to work, or get lost. Chase's face went pale, then flushed, under the scolding. His fists clenched, but in the end he lowered his head sullen. So this was how considerate he was toward Monica, working to pay for her stay. It had never once occurred to him that I, pregnant, might have needed that same consideration. Whether the man had a heart in him at all, I honestly couldn't say. Escorted by the guides and the manager, we made it back to our room. Tomorrow we'd leave, and Chase would never see us again. That night, I sat with my son on our room's small balcony, looking at the stars, and opened a bottle of peanut milk for him. He was happily cradling it, had just taken a small sip, when out of nowhere, Chase came scrambling over the railing in a frantic rush. He snatched the bottle from my son's hands and hurled it to the ground, then jabbed a finger at me, roaring, "Ivy, are you trying to kill our son? Everyone in the Reed family is allergic to peanuts. It runs in our blood. Giving him this? Are you out of your mind?" Chase's roar cut through the quiet night, harsh and jarring. Startled guests stepped out of their rooms, craning their necks to see what was happening. Monica came rushing out too, shrieking, "I know, right? That stuff could have killed him. You're way too extreme just to get Chase's attention." I looked at Chase's face, twisted with what he called fatherly love, and could only find it ironic. "Open your eyes and look. Does my son show a single sign of an allergic reaction?" I picked him up and rubbed soothing circles on Rowan's back. He'd clearly been startled, his little mouth still pouting, but his breathing was steady, his eyes clear, no trace of discomfort anywhere. Chase froze. The anger on his face melted into confusion and panic, and he started muttering to himself. "Everyone in the Reed family is allergic to peanuts, a few peanuts, and we can barely breathe. My father, my grandfather, all of them. How could he not?" Monica jumped in, reassuring him with total confidence. "Even a beast doesn't devour its own cub. Maybe he just didn't drink enough of it. Not a big enough dose to matter. My son has never once been allergic to peanuts." I cut off her speculation, my voice flat and final. "There's not a single drop of Reed blood in him. You two don't get a say in this." Chase gritted his teeth and shook his head, stubborn as ever. "No, I don't believe it." "Mommy," my son said, tilting his face up, his voice small. "Can I have some more? It's sweet. I want more." I stroked his hair gently. "Baby, it's too late to go buy more now. We'll have some tomorrow." "He can't have it." Chase's tone turned sharp. "I need to work hard and save up for the next leg of the trip. Why can't you ever just behave?" I let out a cold laugh. "You want your freedom and you wouldn't let me manage your life. But you think you get to manage mine? Don't I get any freedom of my own?" All in the name of the freedom he'd claimed for himself, he'd abandoned his wife and child without a second thought. I'd already parted ways with him completely, and he still refused to see it. The commotion finally brought the manager running, two burly staff members trailing behind him. "Chase Monica out. Now." Chase tried to argue, but the staff had already closed in, one on each side, hauling him off. "Ivy, he can't have any more. Do you hear me?" He shouted over his shoulder as they dragged him away, still refusing to back down. Monica stamped her foot, shot me one last venomous glare, and hurried after him. The world went quiet at last. Early the next morning, I took my son out to meet up with Nathan. To my surprise, Chase was posted outside the guest house gate like some kind of sentry, dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. He clearly hadn't slept. He stepped in front of me, his voice urgent, almost obsessive. "I need to know for certain if my son's okay. We should get him to the hospital right now for a full checkup." I gave him a cold glance. "Not necessary. Move." That's when my guides arrived. One of them pulled a bottle of peanut milk from his backpack and twisted off the cap. "Little man, you didn't get to finish your peanut milk last night, did you? Here you go." My son's eyes lit up, and he grabbed it eagerly. Before Chase could stop him, he was already gulping it down, several big swallows at once. He drained nearly half the bottle in one go, then set it down, looking thoroughly satisfied, licking his lips with contentment. Not a single sign of trouble. "That's not possible. How is that possible?" The color drained out of Chase's face entirely, his eyes shaking in their sockets. He lost all reason and grabbed my son's arm, frantically checking his arms and neck over and over, searching for even the faintest hint of an allergic reaction. "No allergy, my son. How can he not be allergic?" Chase's voice trembled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking violently. "How can you not be my son? Give him back to me." I snapped, trying to pull my son away from him. Right then, a voice rang out behind me, steady, powerful, etched with a cold that brooked no argument. "Let go. Who said you could touch my wife and son?" The air in the driveway went instantly still. The voice didn't rise in anger, yet it carried an iron authority that made the guest house manager instinctively take a step back. Chase froze. His hands, still clutching my son's arm, trembled as a shadow fell. Over him, a tall man in a charcoal gray cashmere coat stepped out from the back of a midnight black Rolls-Royce SUV parked just beyond the gate. He possessed a sharp, striking jawline, cold, dark eyes, and an aura of effortless command that only decades of old money and immense power could cultivate. Nathan Sterling. Beside him stood two broad-shouldered men in dark tailored suits, his personal security detail. "Daddy!" Rowan cried out, his little face instantly brightening. Nathan moved with smooth, unhurried grace. He stepped between Chase and us, his hand reaching out like a vice. With a single fluid twist of his wrist, Nathan peeled Chase's fingers off Rowan's arm and pushed Chase back 3 full paces. Chase stumbled backward over his own boots, crashing against the wooden fence of the guest house. Nathan didn't even grant Chase a second glance. He immediately knelt down, pulling Rowan into his broad chest, checking the boy's arm for any red marks. Did he hurt you, Rowan? Nathan asked, his voice instantly softening into a deep, warm rumble. No, Daddy. Rowan shook his head, burying his small face into Nathan's neck. He was squeezing me because he said I don't have a peanut allergy. Nathan kissed the top of Rowan's head, then stood up, smoothing his tailored coat. He wrapped one long arm securely around my waist, pulling me close against his side. The familiar scent of cedarwood and faint rain on his clothes instantly enveloped me, washing away every drop of tension in my chest. Are you all right, honey? Nathan whispered in my ear, his thumb gently stroking my hip. I'm fine, I murmured, resting my head against his shoulder for a brief second. He just wouldn't let us leave. Nathan turned his head. His eyes locked onto Chase. The warmth in his expression vanished, replaced by an icy, suffocating pressure that made the surrounding air feel 20 degrees colder. Chase.I'd, I presume, Nathan said smoothly. Chase straightened his posture, trying frantically to salvage whatever pride he had left in front of Monica and the guest house staff. He looked at Nathan's tailored coat, at the Patek Philippe watch gleaming on Nathan's wrist, and then at the two bodyguards standing at attention. Panic flickered in Chase's eyes, but his deep-seated delusion quickly buried it. Who the hell are you? Chase demanded, pointing a dirty, callous finger at Nathan. I don't care how much money you have. You can't just take another man's wife and son. Monica, standing near the doorway, stared at Nathan's car and clothes with wide, greedy eyes, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized the sterling group crest on the vehicle's hubcaps. Chase, Monica whispered, pulling on his sleeve, her voice trembling slightly. That's Nathan Sterling, the CEO of Sterling International. Chase shoved her hand away, his face turning an unhealthy, blotchy red. I don't care who he is. Ivy was mine for 5 years. She was carrying my baby when I left. The kid is 3 years old. Do the math. He's my blood. Nathan let out a soft, dry chuckle. It was a sound devoid of any humor, carrying only cold, absolute contempt. Your blood. Nathan raised an eyebrow, stepping forward. Chase instinctively flinched, taking a half step back. Chase, you left a woman who was 5 months pregnant in an unheated apartment with $80 in her bank account so you could ride bicycles across the mountains. You didn't leave a family behind. You left a crime scene. It wasn't a crime. Chase screamed, his eyes bloodshot. We had an agreement. She agreed to give me 3 years of freedom. She promised she'd wait for me. I looked at Chase, feeling nothing but a profound, hollow pity. I never promised you anything, Chase, I said, my voice cutting through his, shouting like a quiet knife. You wrote a note on the kitchen counter, turned off your phone and walked out while I was in the hospital. Chase's jaw worked silently. You were in the hospital? I was in the hospital for severe preeclampsia, I said flatly, holding Nathan's hand tightly. My blood pressure was dangerously high. I couldn't keep food down for 4 days. I called your phone 46 times in 12 hours. Chase's face paled slightly. My phone didn't have service in the canyon. No, Monica muttered nervously, backing away. He turned his phone off because he said your calls were ruining his creative focus. Nathan's jaw clenching was the only sign of his rising rage, though his grip on my waist remained impeccably gentle. When I got home from the clinic with my prescription, I continued, staring dead into Chase's eyes. I found your note. Don't manage my life. See you in 3 years. Do you know what I did then, Chase? Chase swallowed hard, his voice barely a rasp. You took care of yourself for our son. I walked right back down the stairs. I said every word slow, deliberate, and clear. I caught a cab back to the hospital, signed the consent forms, and had the pregnancy terminated. The world seemed to stop moving. The wind rustling through the pine trees was the only sound left in the driveway. Chase stared at me, his eyes dilating until his pupils were tiny black dots. The color drained from his skin, until he looked like a corpse standing in the dirt. What? Chase stammered, shaking his head frantically. What did you just say? There is no Reed child, I said softly. Your child died 3 years ago on an operating table because his father chose a bicycle ride over his life. I buried every single trace of you that afternoon. I threw your clothes in the dumpster, sold the furniture, and moved to another city. No, Chase gasped, grabbing his head with both hands, stumbling backward into the fence. No. You're lying. You're saying this to hurt me. You wouldn't do that. You loved me. You wanted a family with me. She isn't lying. Nathan's voice cut in cold and sharp as a guillotine. 6 months after she erased you from her life, I met Ivy. I spent 2 years earning her trust, healing the scars you left on her soul, and convincing her that real men don't run away when life gets difficult. Rowan is my biological son, conceived 2 years ago, born in the autumn. Nathan took an official medical document from his coat pocket, a certified paternity test and birth record he always kept updated for international travel, and tossed it onto the hood of Chase's dusty work truck. Look at the dates, Reed, Nathan spat. Read it and realize what an absolute fool you are. Chase frantically lunged for the paper. His trembling fingers traced the ink. Child, Rowan Sterling. Father, Nathan Sterling, 99.99% match. Mother, Ivy Sterling. Date of birth, October 14th. October. Chase whispered, the paper fluttering from his hands into the dirt. October, 2 years ago. He looked up at Rowan, who was resting his head peacefully on Nathan's shoulder, holding his small handmade cello bag. There was no Reed blood in him. There was no secret romantic tribute. There was no long-suffering woman waiting in the shadows for a free-spirited cyclist to return. Ivy had moved on completely. She had married a king, built an empire of a life, and erased Chase as if he had been nothing more than a bad dream. My baby. Chase choked out, tears finally bursting from his bloodshot eyes, falling into his dusty beard. My baby is gone. I killed my own child. Monica stared at the paper lying in the dirt, then looked at Nathan's tailored suit and finally at Chase, who was weeping uncontrollably on his knees against the fence. The illusion she had built over 3 years, that she was the special untamed muse of a brilliant, free-spirited man, shattered into disgusting, pathetic pieces. Chase wasn't a free spirit. He was an unresponsible, cowardly deadbeat who had abandoned a sick woman, caused the abortion of his own child, and was now working for minimum wage cleaning toilets in a mountain guest house while another man raised a prince. You. Monica looked at Chase with utter disgust, her fake sweet tone completely vanished. You told me she was crazy. You told me she was a manipulative bitch who was trying to trap you with a kid. Chase didn't answer. He was curled on the ground, clutching his head, sobbing hysterically into the dirt. I spent 3 years riding bikes in the cold with you, Monica shrieked, kicking Chase's leg. I slept in cheap tents. I washed my hair in cold rivers, because I thought you were going to inherit your family's business after your 3-year journey. You lied to me, you broke loser. Get away from me. Chase screamed back, swinging his arm wildly, hitting Monica's shoulder. It's your fault. You were the one who told me women handle pregnancy instinctively. You told me to leave her. You ruined my life. The two of them began screaming and shoving each other in the gravel like two wild dogs fighting over scraps. The guest house manager hurried over, his face red with embarrassment, flanked by 2 burly staff members. That's enough, the manager yelled. Chase, Reed, Monica Cole, you are both fired. Get your bags and get off my property right now before I call the sheriff for disturbing my high-profile guests. Nathan didn't waste another second watching the circus. He held my hand tightly, ushering Rowan and me into the back seat of the Rolls-Royce. The heavy double-glazed glass door sealed shut with a soft vacuum click, instantly cutting off the screaming, crying, and drama outside. Inside the car, the air was warm, smelling of fresh leather and soft vanilla. Nathan pulled me into his arms, burying his face in the crook of my neck, holding me so tightly I could feel the rapid, heavy beat of his heart. I'm sorry I didn't get here 10 minutes earlier, Nathan murmured, his voice laced with rare, raw vulnerability. I shouldn't have let you face that garbage alone. I smiled, reaching up to gently stroke his dark hair. I wasn't alone, Nathan. I had Rowan. And I knew you were coming. Rowan poked Nathan's arm, giggling. Daddy, the strange man was crying in the dirt. Is he sick? Nathan looked at our son, his dark eyes melting into absolute tenderness. Reached out, ruffling Rowan's hair. No, buddy. He's just paying for a very old, very stupid mistake. Our vacation in the Rockies continued as planned, completely untainted by the encounter. Nathan had booked a sprawling private estate in Banff, surrounded by snow-capped peaks, pine forests, and crystal-clear glacial lakes. For 5 days we lived in absolute luxury and tranquility. Rowan practiced his cello on the glass balcony, overlooking the valley, his music floating through the mountain air, while Nathan and I sat by the outdoor fireplace, sipping wine and watching the sunset. However, Chase's descent into hell was far from over. After being kicked out of the guest house without their final pay, Chase and Monica were forced to drag their heavy gear to a cheap, rundown motel near the highway. Without money, without a purpose, and weighed down by the crushing guilt of what he had lost, Chase began drinking heavily. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw me, not the pale, exhausted woman he had left in the apartment 3 years ago, but the radiant, stunning woman standing beside Nathan Sterling, wearing diamonds and cashmere, looking at him with absolute indifference. He realized that the freedom he had chased for 3 years was nothing but an empty, icy void. One evening, after drinking half a bottle of cheap whiskey, Chase staggered into the bathroom of the motel, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His skin was ruined by the sun, his eyes were sunken and bloodshot, his hands were calloused from manual labor, and his youth was entirely gone. I can fix this, Chase muttered, his mind completely broken by obsession. She loved me for 5 years. She's just doing this to get back at me. If I show her I'm willing to give up my freedom, she'll come back. He packed his small canvas bag, stole the remaining $300 from Monica's purse while she was sleeping, and walked out into the freezing mountain night. 2 days later, Chase managed to track down the location of our private estate through a local tour guide he had bribed. It was the final evening of our trip. A private classical music recital had been arranged in the grand ballroom of the Banff Alpine Resort, where Rowan was scheduled to perform a short solo alongside his conservatory professor. The room was filled with high society guests, diplomats, and famous musicians. Rowan stood on the stage under a warm gold spotlight, his small hands holding his custom handmade cello, playing a flawless Bach suite. The crowd listened in breathless silence. Nathan and I sat in the front row, holding hands, our hearts bursting with pride. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the hall were shoved open with a violent crash. A disheveled, filthy figure stumbled into the opulent ballroom. It was Chase. He wore dirty, torn jeans, a grease-stained jacket, and smelled strongly of cheap alcohol. His eyes were wild, bloodshot, and frantic as he scanned the glittering room. Ivy! Chase screamed at the top of his lungs, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings, shattering the delicate cello melody. The audience gasped in horror. Security guards immediately moved toward him, but Chase pulled a small, rusty pocket knife from his pocket, waving it wildly in the air. "Stay back," Chase yelled, tears and sweat pouring down his unwashed face. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want my wife and son." Rowan stopped playing, clutching his cello nervously, looking toward the back of the room. Nathan's face turned into a mask of pure, murderous dark steel. He stood up, slowly, stepping in front of me, shielding Rowan and me from view. "Chase," I said, stepping out beside Nathan, my voice cold and loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Put the knife down. You are making an absolute fool of yourself." Chase saw me, and a manic, terrifying smile broke across his face. He dropped his hands slightly, taking a staggering step down the center aisle. "Ivy, look at me." Chase wept, his voice cracking with pathetic desperation. "I brought the knife to show you. I'm willing to cut off my own fingers. I'm willing to give up cycling. I'll never touch a bike again. I'll get a job in a factory. I'll work 80 hours a week." He dropped to his knees right there on the red velvet carpet of the aisle, sobbing hysterically in front of 200 high society guests. "Please, Ivy, give me another chance. Don't let that rich man raise our son. Let me be a father. I don't want freedom anymore. Freedom is a disease. I just want you." The audience murmured in disgust, looking at the filthy man weeping on the carpet. Nathan raised his right hand slightly. 4 black-suited sterling security officers, who had been waiting in the shadows, moved like lightning. Before Chase could even raise his arm, one officer kicked the pocket knife out of his hand, sending it spinning across the floor, while 2 others slammed Chase face first onto the carpet, pinning his arms tightly behind his back. Click. Heavy steel handcuffs locked around Chase's wrists. A local police captain who had been attending the event as a guest stepped forward with his badge drawn. "Chase Reed," the captain announced sternly. "You are under arrest for armed trespassing, public endangerment, felony harassment, and violation of a temporary restraining order issued by Sterling International 2 days ago." Chase thrashed violently against the carpet, his face pressed against the velvet, screaming until his throat bled. "Ivy, look at me. Tell them to let me go. Ivy, I love you. I've always loved you." I stood on the elevated stage, holding Nathan's hand, looking down at the man screaming in handcuffs. "You never loved me, Chase," I said softly, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "You only loved the idea of having someone wait for you while you ran away. But the world doesn't wait for cowards." Nathan looked at the officers. "Take him away. Ensure the prosecutor files for the maximum sentence without bail." "Yes, Mr. Sterling," the captain nodded. The officers dragged Chase out of the ballroom, his desperate, pathetic shrieks fading down the long, carpeted hallways until the heavy oak doors shut, sealing the room in total peace once more. 18 months later. Vienna, Austria. The golden hall of the Musikverein was packed to maximum capacity. Sunlight streamed through the high, arched stained glass windows, illuminating the glittering gold statues lining the walls. On the main stage, A 5-year-old boy in a crisp black tuxedo sat beside a full symphony orchestra. Rowan held his handmade cello, his small fingers flying across the fingerboard. With extraordinary, breathtaking maturity, the final, soaring chord of his concerto resonated through the hall, ending in a moment of profound, absolute magic. Thunderous applause. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Flowers rained down onto the stage. In the royal box overlooking the stage, I sat wrapped in a tailored silk dress, tears of pure joy glistening in my eyes. Nathan sat beside me, his arm wrapped securely around my shoulders, his dark eyes shining with immense pride as he clapped. He turned his head, pressing a sweet, lingering kiss to my lips. He's brilliant, honey, just like his mother. I smiled, resting my head against his shoulder. He gets his focus from you. Thousands of miles away, in a state penitentiary in the high desert, the midday sun beat down mercilessly on an outdoor dirt yard. Chase Reed was wearing a faded, coarse orange jumpsuit, holding a heavy wooden broom, sweeping gravel near the chain-link fence under the watchful eyes of armed guards. His face was gaunt, his hair shaved short, his hands covered in calluses and scars from hard prison labor. A small, mounted television inside the guard post near the fence was playing an international news broadcast. The reporter's voice echoed softly through the wire fence. And that concludes the historic debut of 5-year-old cello prodigy Rowan Sterling in Vienna today. Accompanying him are his parents, billionaire philanthropist Nathan Sterling and renowned designer Ivy Sterling. On the small screen, a high-definition image flashed. I was standing under the golden arches of the concert hall, radiant, beautiful, holding a massive bouquet of white roses. Nathan stood beside me, his arm wrapped around my waist, while Rowan sat on Nathan's shoulder, holding his gold trophy, all three of us laughing happily under the bright lights. Chase stopped sweeping. He stood frozen by the fence, his dirty fingers gripping the cold iron mesh, staring at the screen. He watched the woman he had abandoned, the child he had forced into an abortion, and the man who had given them the world, living a life of unimaginable glory, love, and light. A guard walked over, slamming a nightstick against the metal fence with a deafening clang. Hey, Reed, stop slacking off, the guard barked. Keep sweeping. Chase slowly lowered his head. A single tear cut a dirty track through the dust on his cheek, falling onto the dry, barren dirt beneath his boots. He picked up his heavy broom and began sweeping again, back and forth in the cold, empty silence of his own cage. He had demanded 3 years of freedom, and now he had a lifetime to think about what his freedom had cost him.